Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope this is working. Unlike some of the Zoom and Teams calls we became used to during lockdown, I can't see any smiling faces on my screen other than Mrs. Coulihan. So I'll have to trust that you are in and you've joined us. And anyway, we are recording this talk tonight, but welcome to this Teams Town Hall event. It's intended for parents and pupils of Year 9 at the start of the GCSE subject choice process. As I mentioned, we are recording this event for your reference and we'll share it with you in a forthcoming college bulletin. So by way of introduction, I'm Paul Jones. I'm Deputy Head Academic at the college. I'm joined this evening by Mrs. Judith Coulihan, who's Director of Learning Development, and she's here to give us a bit more information about how access arrangements work in the GCSE years, and you'll hear from her later. We were also meant to be joined by Mr. Sam Shaw, one of the assistant heads, who's actually looking after the Year 9 options process, but unfortunately he's not very well at the moment. So we send him our best wishes and I'll do my best in his absence. So in this short talk, we aim to give you an overview of how the pupils will choose their subjects, the number of subjects they'll study, and some things for pupils to consider when they're making their selection. There'll be a lot of support and guidance available from your son's tutor, but it's also important that they discuss their choices with you at home. I'll be meeting with the pupils in the morning to go through much of this information myself, and there are also tutor time resources dedicated to selecting options over the coming weeks. And there'll be an important opportunity for your son to discuss this with your tutor, with their tutor, to help guide their thinking. So we hope it's useful and that we can answer any questions you have about the process, and this will help frame your conversations with your son over the next few weeks. Throughout this, please do use the question and answer facility to ask any questions, and there's some time we can dedicate to that at the end. And I'm hoping it's somewhere near the top of your screen, so please do enter your questions there. As I mentioned, this is the start of the options process for Year 9 pupils, and after tonight's talk you'll be sent a link to the digital GCSE Options Guide. Now this is an online publication with further details about each subject on offer, and it's for you to go through with your sons and in advance of the deadline at the end of January. We've also asked each head of department to create a short video outlining what their GCSE courses look like, what the pupils will actually study, the criteria for entry, and most importantly, what the pupils will need to do in order to succeed. And also, very importantly, on Friday the 26th of January, there's the Year 9 Parents Conference, where you'll have the chance to meet with your son's subject teachers online in order to discuss their suitability for individual subjects. So I've got a few slides to take you through. It really won't take long, and then we'll hear from Mrs. Coulihan, and then a chance for some questions. So without further ado, I'll begin, if I may. I'm hoping you can see my screen. So the headlines, GCSE subject choices. It's an exciting time. This is the first time the pupils will have had to specialise studying those subjects that they want to study, that they enjoy the most. It's also a daunting time for many pupils in that there is a choice and they have to decide which subjects they no longer wish to study. And for some, that's a very, very difficult decision. We encourage all pupils to study a broad and balanced curriculum. There are no set subject combinations or subjects that pupils have to take at Shiplake, and I'll go through that a bit more, but we would encourage pupils to continue to study a range of subjects, and we are firm believers in the fact that what pupils enjoy should be the guiding principle. We want pupils to study in Year 10 the subjects which they enjoy and which will therefore give them the greatest chance of success. That's been a very, very...
Mr. Jones, we can't see your slides moving on.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I can't. Sorry.
You can't. I wonder why that is. Can you not see this at all?
It's the title slide on my screen.
Right. Okay. Let me see if I can.
Interrupt.
Let me see if I can alter this. Thanks for pointing that out. Let's have a look. So can you see that? Is there any change there?
No.
Right. Forgive me. I'll try one more time. I hope you can still see us. I will try to share my screen.
Yes, now we can see.
Fantastic. Great. Let me just get my bearings, and I'm hoping that works. Does that work? Excellent. Thank you very much. Makes more sense when I'm talking now. And also, in terms of studying the subjects that pupils still enjoy at the moment, will keep future options open. There are very few pupils at this stage of their education that have a firm idea of what they want to study. Apologies if I left you. I think I'm back now.
Yeah.
Carol, I do hope you didn't miss much there. To keep their future options open. However, that said, there are some pupils who will have a very firm idea of the sorts of subjects and the sorts of courses they will want to do at university, the sorts of jobs they are looking towards. And for those individuals, it's important that they do begin to look at the combination of subjects that will serve them best. For example, those pupils who enjoy computing and coding and know they want to have a career in the world of computing, we would strongly recommend they consider the subject of GCSE computing alongside triple science, possibly creative media. But again, these are individual decisions and individual discussions. Moving on, I hope this works. Excellent. It's worth pointing out, I know they've been in place for a number of years, but for many of us of a certain vintage, it's still worth remembering what the GCSE number grades roughly equate to. So, of course, it's now 9 to 1, 9 being the very top grade. You could equate that to an A star, if you like. So in terms of bands, we would look for grades 7 to 9 to be A star and A. B and C would be 6, 5, and 4, and anything below a 4, unfortunately, is not a pass. Pupils will still get a grade, of course. We won't talk too much about that. Let's focus on the pass grade. So a grade 4 is recognised by the government as a standard pass, but a grade 5 is considered a strong pass. And for entry into our sixth form, it's 5s that we consider strong passes. But I hope that's a useful reminder for some parents. So this, hopefully you'll see a wonderful wheel here, and it's just to show the breadth of subjects we have on offer. So in the center are the core subjects, and around the outside are the option subjects, roughly divided into sort of faculty groups. And this diagram will be in the options guide for you to look at. I would like to point out the little icon in the bottom right of the screen I'm sharing, little play icon. Wherever you see that in the digital options guide, that means there's a video embedded from the head of department, so please do look out for those as you work through. So in terms of numbers of subjects, so pupils will roughly, or on average, will study 9 subjects. So there'll be 5 subjects in yellow, which we consider core subjects. That's maths, that's English language and English literature. And then combined science is the most popular option. That's where pupils will study all 3 sciences separately, but they will receive 2 GCSE grades for that. So that gives us the 5 from the core, and then the majority of pupils will select 4 option subjects shown in the maroon box there, and no need to go through those at this stage. At some point in year 11, it's worth pointing out that if it's clear that pupils are struggling with the demands of both English language and literature, we'd strongly recommend that they don't continue with literature and focus their attention on language, because that's the one that pupils need to secure a pass in before they're able to move on to the next phase of their education at Shiplake or beyond. But that's just about English. And I mentioned combined science, that's the most popular option. However, those pupils in set 1 science who are considering studying science at A level, we would strongly suggest that you consider taking triple science, and that's where again pupils will study the 3 sciences separately, and they will receive a GCSE grade in each science rather than an average 2 grade result. So yes, pupils largely achieve a maximum of 9 GCSEs. I say largely because there will be some instances and some individuals who becomes clear are struggling to cope with the demands of the 9, and maybe at some point in year 11 we'll have individual discussions to consider dropping 1 or 2 subjects. And I know Mr. Coulahan will mention this later as well, but those pupils who enjoy the support of or core place in learning development, they will take 3 option subjects, and in place of the 4th, they will enjoy the support of colleagues in learning development. So they will achieve a maximum of 8. Some schools, we're aware, will make their pupils study a greater number of GCSEs, although a large number of schools I'm aware of are now dialing back on the number. And we have always had 9, simply because we'd rather choose to do fewer, but do them well. Most sixth forms will require 5 strong passes at GCSE, the Shiplake sixth form in particular, that's our offer. So we'd far rather pupils did fewer, but did them well. Working through, so I'd like to use the language of the Shiplake 7, our academic framework. Pupils challenge, I'd like them to be curious. I'd like them to be open and to find out more about the subjects, particularly if a GCSE subject is less familiar to them. So be curious, find out, speak to people in-house in the year above, speak to your teacher, speak to the head of department, read the options guide, find out exactly what's involved before you make your final decision. I'd also urge pupils to be independent. This is your set of GCSEs. This will be a message I will deliver loud and clear tomorrow. Please don't consider subjects just because your friends are also considering them. It has to be driven by you, your interests and your strengths. Open-minded, I'd urge all pupils to be open-minded. Don't rule anything out until you've found out exactly if it will play to your strengths or exactly what's involved in that subject. And be reflective. Think about what has brought you the greatest success in your 2 progress reviews, your 2 reports to date if you've just joined us, or what has brought you the greatest success and enjoyment if you joined us in year 7. So think back at the academic success that you're already enjoyed. Parents challenge. Largely, I'd urge parents or invite you to be open-minded. The landscape has changed since we were certainly at school, at university. I think we need to be led by the pupils' aspirations as well. It's important that they are fully a part of this process. I mentioned soft skills there. We're doing a lot of work on AI, which we will share with parents in due course. And it's clear that in an age of AI, it's even more important to be able to be human, to be able to interact with the machines that we will all be working with, and which our sons, daughters will be working with. Therefore, please don't rule out any subjects, maybe the creative arts, because of the soft skills involved. In fact, they may be even more important than some of the traditional subjects in the future. Creativity, for the same reason, will become very, very important. It's how we use the AI tools that will be available to us and will be commonplace. And Shiplake sixth form, I mentioned a moment ago, we require pupils moving from year 11 into year 12 to achieve 5 strong passes, and a grade 7, that's the top of the 7, 8, 9, so an A at least in those subjects they are considering for A level. We do have a large number of vocational subjects, of course, and we require a grade 5 for those, but for A level subjects it's a grade 7, simply because that's the way that we guarantee that pupils can cope with the demands of A level. And that will be the next talk that we will be having in probably 3 years' time. And you probably can't see this. I'll just summarize this timeline, but it will be in the bulletin. That's just to say that starts with this evening at the top, the options evening. We'll send the options form to you in the bulletin tomorrow for you to have a look at, for you for it to start those conversations. The Year 9 Parents Conference is on the XYAP Friday, the 26th of January. And then we require pupils to submit their choices by Monday, the 29th of January. That's the Monday following the parents' conference, and that then allows us to have an internal process of review where tutors, heads of department will review all pupils' choices just to check that they're on the right lines or they've chosen subjects appropriate to their strengths. Just to make it clear, at this stage, there are no option blocks. There are no prescribed option blocks. We simply invite pupils to submit their 4 choices. We then take those choices away and we will build the timetable. In 99% of cases, we are able to accommodate all of pupils' first choice subjects. However, there may be 1 or 2 pupils in every year where we might need to go back to you and say, really sorry, this combination simply is not possible. And that's why we ask you to submit a reserve choice as well. So make sure that the reserve choice is a viable option for you and one that you would be happy to consider. But as I say, in the vast majority of cases, I have colleagues that work wonders and put the jigsaw puzzle together, and we are able to accommodate 99% of pupils' choices. This is also in the options guide. I won't labour the point now, but I think this is important for pupils. These are important questions to guide pupils' thinking and their reflection. What subjects do they enjoy? What subjects are they good at? And which subjects might they need later on, without wishing to specialise too early, of course. So that's the end of my information. There's lots to take in there, and that's why we're recording this, and we'll share it for your reference. And I'd like to hand over to Mrs. Coulahan, who's got some very important information for us about access arrangements and how that works in the GCSE years. Thank you, Mrs. Coulahan.
Thank you. So good evening, everybody. So tonight I will give you a brief overview of access arrangements, or sometimes they're referred to as exam access arrangements. It is going to be an overview. I'll try to be brief, just like Mr. Jones, but I will have a detailed explanation of access arrangements and a very close look at individual access arrangements and the rule that apply to all of them later on. And that's going to be on the 3rd of February. That's a Saturday in the morning. The details have been sent out about this already in last week's bulletin, but it will be published again tomorrow and in the coming weeks. There is an RSVP form for that one, so please, if you're interested in attending that talk, please just fill in that form so that we know, what sort of numbers we expect. And that's very important because of parking. We're going to have other events going on at the same time. But back to today's presentation. So access arrangements now. So they don't apply to every student, but they do apply to a significant number of our students. What are they? I will just sort of state the obvious. I know most of you are very familiar with this terminology, but access arrangements are reasonable adjustments to remove potential barriers to assessments. That is to do with exams. Now, the rules related to access arrangements are very, very complicated. They are they are published by the Joint Council for Qualification. You can see the name of the umbrella organization on the screen. And in the presentation, I included a link to their very comprehensive document. It's the guidance that they update every single year in August, ready for the new academic year. They make changes every year, so we have to keep abreast with the changes. And every single school, every exam center up and down the country have to follow these rules. So everything that I'm going to talk about today is basically comes from those regulations, the guidance. Access arrangements, they only apply from GCSE level onwards. So the first time when these very formal and strict rules have to be put in place, when we have to adhere to the rules, is the first set of external exams, which are GCSEs, and then slightly different rules apply to A levels or GCE qualifications. So key principles regarding access arrangements. So like I said, access arrangements are reasonable adjustments to remove barriers to assessment. The guidance actually states that they are to remove barriers to assessment for students with a disability. Now, that disability can be a special educational need, like having a diagnosis of dyslexia, but it could also be a physical disability. The regulations constantly refer to persistent and significant difficulties. These are two key words, very, very important. Persistent means that we need to prove that these difficulties are not new. They are very well known to the school. There is a well-documented history of that difficulty, but they also have to be significant. And depending on which exam access arrangement we look at, we need to be able to prove, and that is when I say we, the schools, the exam centres, that the students' performance is below the average level. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail soon. But at the same time, every single centre, but ultimately it is the SENCO's, the Special Educational Needs Coordinator's responsibility to make sure that there is a balance between removing barriers to assessment, but at the same time, not giving access arrangements that are not strictly to cater for the need. So I need to make sure that I'm not giving an unfair advantage to any student by putting something in place that they don't qualify for. So, Mr. Jones, next slide. Thank you. So obviously I've explained what barriers to assessment mean and balancing this need between meeting the need, but not giving an unfair advantage. But the actual wording I copied out here from the regulations as well, which obviously you can review once this presentation is published. Yes, so a couple of key aspects of access arrangements. Perhaps the most important thing that I need to highlight is that there is, if you like, a complete reset from year 9 onwards in terms of access arrangements. So anything that was in place before year 9, but really before we reached the GCSE years, is unofficial. In terms of, so for example, if students had access arrangements in place when they were in prep school or primary school, that is considered unofficial. Certainly, it is not valid for the formal exams, for external exams. Everything has to be reassessed. Whatever was in place before, and this also applies to findings of educational psychologist assessment or a diagnosis of any special educational need. The diagnosis is valid for life, but the scores from previous assessments cannot be used as a direct evidence and application for access arrangements. They, however, can be used to build the picture of need. So this is where we refer to having to have evidence for persistent difficulties. So in other words, if a student has a diagnosis of, let's say, dyslexia, that's fine. That proves that they've had this difficulty for a number of years, but I cannot use the scores from an educational psychologist report or a specialist teacher's report as evidence, numerical evidence for their current need. So eligibility for access arrangement has to be based on below average scores from internal testing, so from the current setting. So like I said, privately commissioned educational psychologist assessment, diagnostic assessment cannot be used, scores from that to apply for access arrangements. And very importantly, also, scores alone that we gain from our internal testing, they are not sufficient evidence for access arrangement. They also have to be supported by teacher evidence, or sometimes it's referred to as evidence of normal way of working in the classroom and in internal assessments. So in other words, we need numerical evidence, so quantitative data, and that comes from internal assessments. At our centre, so at Shiplake, it's myself and a colleague of mine, Mrs. Bell, who are licensed to carry out these assessments, because they are you can't, so it's not something that any teacher can do. You have to have a special qualification for this, very similar to actually a qualification of an EP, an educational psychologist or a specialist teacher assessor. And yes, but we also need the qualitative data, which is the confirmation of the subject teachers saying that they can see a significant need in the classroom, and they can confirm that this pupil needs, let's say, additional time in their lessons as well when they carry out their work. Next slide. Thank you. I feel a bit like during COVID times, those professors who updated us on the progress with COVID. So this is the timeline. I thought it might be helpful to summarize the process. So as you can see, the process begins in year 9. At the end of year 9, we use an online screener called the Lucid Exec Screener in the summer term of year 9 to screen the entire cohort. So no matter, irrespective of whether they have an SEN diagnosis or any SEN history, we screen everybody because we don't want to miss anybody who might qualify for adjustments in exams. Not all schools do this, but we do. Those results we'll look at in the summer holidays and in the autumn term of year 10. And if in year 10 we see that there are some below average scores in this screener, or some of the teachers have raised concerns about a particular student, or there is a significant SEN history, so whichever applies, then we do follow-up one-to-one testing. Follow-up testing is always one-to-one, and it's always with a qualified assessor, so either myself or Mrs. Bell, and this takes place in the autumn and or the spring term of year 10. We do not only screen, but follow up a lot of our students with one-to-one testing. And then we also collect teacher evidence of normal way of working at the same time. The aim is to be able to put in provisional access arrangements, put them in place by the end of year 10. So when students sit our internal end of year exams in year 10, by then we should have a really good idea of what they are very likely to qualify for in year 11. So they have their provisional access arrangements in place, and they sit the end of year exam in year 10 with those access arrangements in place. So they sit the exams, and then we, Mrs. Bell and myself, we get a feedback from the subject teachers, and quite often there are adjustments in the autumn term of year 11 to those provisional arrangements. Sometimes we add a bit more, or sometimes we change them because we get evidence that what we put in place is not quite the right adjustment. So there could be adjustments in year 11 in the autumn term. And we aim to finalize everything, all the access arrangements, by the mock exams in year 11. So that's typically January of year 11. And once the access arrangements are finalized, we send a letter to you, the parents, and the students as well. And the final application deadline for access arrangements, so we have to apply to the exam boards one by one, so individually for every single student. And the application deadline for that is the 21st of March of the exam year. So in this case, year 11. So as you can see, it's a very long process. There is a lot more to it. Why it's so long? It's actually a very prescriptive process by JCQ, but yeah, it's a process, and this is how we do it. So it starts at the end of year 9, finishes about this time in year 11. Next slide, Mr. James. So here I am sharing you a bit of information about the Lucid Exec Screener. So this screener was actually originally designed as a dyslexia screener because it looks at crucial aspects of literacy, which are obviously directly related to how someone can cope with written exams. So as you can see on the screen, again, it's quite small, but you will get the slides. It looks at the individual's ability to read words, to read passages. When it comes to passage reading, it looks at reading comprehension accuracy and reading comprehension speed, looks at spelling, handwriting speed, and typing speed. Now, so obviously, when students have difficulties with literacy, that will show up in these tests. But I must point out that this test also tests processing speed and working memory indirectly. How? If a student has difficulties with working memory, that is remembering information short term, they're going to struggle to remember what they have read in the text. Therefore, it's going to reduce their reading comprehension accuracy score, and because they have to go back to the relevant section of the text, it is also going to have a detrimental impact on their reading comprehension speed. Now, very often, most of the time, when students who have a previous diagnosis of, let's say, dyslexia sit this test, those areas of literacy will be impacted, and their scores, so we look at the standard scores, the standardized scores, which is the top row of scores, their scores will be in the below average range. On the graph, you can see a grey band in the middle. That's the average band. So the standardized scores are, well, it's a number, it's very small, but it's between 80 and 140. And it compares the students' performance to peers of the same age nationwide. So this test was standardized on a British sample. So standardized on, they compared the results of lots and lots of teenagers of the same age. Well, actually, this is valid up to age 24. So lots of people of the same age compare their results, produce a ranking order, and they determined what the average range is. So the vast majority of the population falls within the average range. Numerically, it means it's standard scores of 85 and 115. When students fall into that average range, that tells us that they should not have any difficulties with accessing the exams. So there is no further action taken unless the teachers raise concerns. Students who fall in the below average range, when that happens, those blue columns turn orange, and we then start doing follow-up testing, gathering more evidence from teachers, so look into each and individual case. Next slide, Ms. Jones. And this is just a graph to explain how standardized scores work. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with it, but you can see that the average range is that blue area, so standard scores of 85 to 115, and the graph shows you that 68% of the population, no matter what age range or age category we're talking about, falls within that average range, so roughly 2/3 of the population, and the vast majority of the population fall between standard scores of 70 to 130. So some people are slightly below average and some obviously slightly above average. We do look at everybody who has scores in that below average range, 70 to 85, or obviously below. If they have scores in the below 70 range, then we do more testing as well. Next slide, Mr. Jones. So I have to emphasize the importance of having to have evidence for access arrangements, both numerical evidence, so these are these below average scores, not just from the lucid testing, but further testing as well if needed, but also teacher evidence. Because if we don't have either or, and we still apply for access arrangements, well, the online application system will reject the application, so the application will not be approved. But if we try to put something in place without sufficient evidence, it will be considered malpractice. So every single exam center, every single school is inspected by JCQ every year. And the Inspectors come unannounced, so we never know when they're going to come. They will come with a list of 20 students that they have pre-selected. They don't tell us, and we need to show them all the information we hold for those students on the spot. So, and they are very strict about the rules and adherence to the rules, and if they find that any centre put any access arrangement in place without enough evidence, it is considered as malpractice, and ultimately, unfortunately, it means that the candidate can lose their grades. So we have to be very, very strict with adhering to the rules. So I'd like to just take this opportunity to highlight that all our policies related to access arrangement, but actually also our special educational needs and disability policy and word processing policy, they're available on the website. As you can see in the screen, if you go into parent information and then scroll down to policies and downloads, thank you, Mr. Jones, then you will see that access arrangement is the first policy that will be visible. Underneath, we produced a guide for students who have got approved access arrangements, advising them how best, or rather reminding them, because of course we discussed this with the students, but reminding them how best to use their access arrangements. And if you scroll further down that page, you will see, because it's in alphabetical order, our SEN and word processing policies as well. Yes, and it's just a list of policies that are available on the website. So these were the highlights in terms of access arrangements. Like I said, this is just a very brief overview. It's a lot more complicated than this. And if you would like to find out more, please come along to my talk on the 3rd of February. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Coulihan. And details of that, I believe, are already in the bulletin and will continue to be in future bulletins. Is that right, of your talk in February?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to the 70 people who've joined us this evening. It's now an opportunity for questions. And thanks for the comments already coming in. It seems as if some people had difficulty viewing my slides, but it was fine for some. Apologies, anybody did have difficulties. I'll share this with everybody in the bulletin. But of the questions that have come in before now, if I may take the chance to answer some general ones. Thanks, Mr. Hindley. So what are the options, if any, to switch a subject after the January cutoff? Is there a period of time where it's still allowed? Absolutely, yes. The only constraint then is that we may well have already started to build the timetable, or we might not be able to guarantee certain combinations of subjects. So yes, it is still possible to switch before the start of year 10 throughout year 9, but please be aware that it might not be possible simply owing to the timetable that we will then have built based on the first choices. So it's probably for the best if we try to get the first choice of 3 or 4 absolutely correct, but it is possible, of course. Thanks for the question. And then another question come in. Thank you. Do you have a timetable for when the various exam periods will be, mocks and the real thing? Absolutely. Probably more relevant for pupils in years 11 and 13, where we communicate with parents at the start of the year, outlining exactly what happens each term when the mocks are. The mocks are in a couple of weeks for year 11 and 13, for example. But for the pupils in years 9 and 10, we will always communicate with parents when the internal exams are. So there was a sort of an internal, quite a low-key assessment week just before Christmas, just before the holiday, which informed the end of term report. And there would also be another period of internal exams in June, which will inform the final report, the final progress review of the year. But again, that will all be shared with you in good time in the bulletin. But thanks for the question. Just wondering if there are any other questions. As I say, please use the question and answer facility at the top. Unlike other platforms, you can't shout them out to us from the comfort of your living room, but just wait a few more moments to see if any other questions come in. Thank you very much. Would I mind recapping on the compulsory subjects? Not at all. Please allow me a moment to go through this again. I'll just do it. The compulsory subjects are their maths, English language and literature, all pupils will start on both, and science. Combined science is the option for the majority of pupils. So forgive me, I'm just scooting back. There we go. So it's the ones in the yellow box. So maths, both English, language and literature, and science combined. Some pupils may then choose triple science as one of their options, but that would of course still be considered as part of the core subjects. I hope that helps. Thank you. Right, so how do we find out which exam boards? Thanks, Mr. Adams. Exam boards each subject will use so we can look at the content. So sorry, Mrs. Adams, thank you very much. So this level of detail will be in the options guide. At the top of each page, each subject page, are details of the exact spec and the exam board that we use. There's also a summary of what is required or the course content, but then of course you're free to look at the full document online yourself. But in short, that will come in the options guide. Triple science, of course, no problem at all. Thanks, Mr. Siddiqui. So that is where pupils will choose it as one of their options subjects, and then pupils will study. There's a greater number of lessons involved with triple science. They'll study each of the sciences individually, and then they will receive a GCSE grade for each of the individual sciences. So they'll receive 3 GCSE grades for science, one for biology, one for chemistry, one for physics. And because of the demands, it's a greater, the spec, the course covers a greater amount of material than the combined science. We'd recommend that the pupils who are in top set 1 already and likely to study A-level science, they are the ones that we would recommend study triple science. It's quite a demanding course. That said, pupils can still study A-level science if they've chosen combined science or only combined science, the average 2 GCSE grades. It doesn't preclude them from taking A-level in any subject. I do hope that helps. Thank you for the questions. Unfortunately, for combined science, if you choose combined science or you study combined science, then you will still have to study all 3, I'm afraid, and then you will get an average grade, a combined grade. It's a double GCSE. It's quite confusing. It looks on results day, we have lots of questions. It's 99, 98, 88. 87, 77, all the way down, but it counts as 2 separate GCSEs. But yes, you do have to still study all 3. Thanks for the question. Can any GCSE exams be taken earlier? If the student's ready, downsides. Yes, a really good question. We tend not to enter pupils early for exams. Downsides, GCSEs are intended to be a 2-year course, and we'd like pupils to have the full breadth of study. The only subjects that we have considered, again, it's an individual thing, and I'd be happy to have this conversation, but the only subjects that we've considered entering pupils early for would be where there's a native speaker of a language, and you are able to get through the content a little quicker than maybe somebody who hasn't had the experience that you've had. So we would consider that on a case-by-case basis, but we tend to enter pupils for all of the subjects, because by then, as well as going through all of the course content at an appropriate pace, they will have mastered the skills for GCSE success, the study skills, the exam technique. It just gives them extra time to practice. So in our experience, in our setting, we find that the 2 years exams at the end of year 11 works best for our pupils. I do hope that helps. What number of pupils take triple science? It varies year to year. Sorry, raced over that. What number of pupils take triple science? So some years it's 1 set, other years we've got enough for 2 sets, but I would say that the majority of pupils still study combined science, and it's sort of the top end, the top scientists would take triple science. I do hope that clarifies that. So business studies, of course, yes. Who do we ask about it? They don't currently do it. So how do we know if they can do it? Great question. Thank you to Mrs. Detsini. So that is one of the new subjects, of course. We will make sure that the business studies teacher has an opportunity to speak with the pupils. There is also the full guide in the options guide. It is a new subject. It's very accessible. So all I would say is people should take the chance when the business studies teacher speaks with them. Mrs. Hill is our head of business, when she speaks with the pupils, to ask any questions they have then, but also to pay particular attention to the information in the options guide. That'll be very comprehensive. But again, it's a very successful subject for us at both GCSE and in the sixth form. So the fact that, well, all of the pupils pick it up from scratch, of course, in year 10, and it hasn't been a barrier to success so far. But I do hope that helps that question. Is there a difference between business and marketing and enterprise, or are they the same GCSE, please? So we used to offer marketing and enterprise. I think it's business is now the specification that we offer. So it's definitely a business studies GCSE. But again, that detail will be in the options guide. I do hope that helps, Mrs. Stewart. And I'm conscious that things have changed with that subject over the years, but now it is business studies GCSE. Thanks for the question. Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there any guidance on universities' views on non-traditionally academic subjects like creative media and PE? Are they valued less than traditional subjects, i.e. history, maths? So I'm a music teacher, so I'm trying to put my personal views on this aside, but essentially I'd say no. GCSE results are still important, of course, in a university application, not as important as sixth form studies. So if I could use our experience in the sixth form to answer this question, by far the most important thing for the majority of universities are the grades or the UCAS points. So universities are taking a more broad view on where those points and where those grades come from, and that's why Shiplake has been at the forefront of vocational qualifications, whereby some of the BTECs and CTECs, a distinction starred, carries the same UCAS points as an A star at A level. So for some pupils, that's a wonderful route into higher education. So that's and we were aware of I think it's only Oxbridge, possibly Imperial, that don't take UCAS points from vocational subjects. I think it's the number of universities that are not choosing that has shrunk enormously over the years, and there are a growing number of top 10 universities who will now accept UCAS points from vocational subjects. That said, it's always worth checking the individual requirements because they change year on year. But I think in terms of non-traditionally academic, I know my colleagues will have a view on this in creative media and PE. But with PE, of course, there's the consideration. There's lots of physical science, so biology forms a large part of that course, and that will be outlined in the course spec. So there are very few. Music, a requirement to study in detail and analyze set works is a key part of the course, is the majority of the course. So there's a strong academic element to that. So yes, I do hope that answers your question, and that's a big topic, and I'd be very happy to pick up on that separately. But thank you for the question. So I'm just going through as best I can. Are the GCSE subjects that should not be taken alongside each other? That's a good question. As I mentioned at the start, we don't prescribe any particular combinations for pupils. However, if a pupil, to use the example I used earlier, was considering taking computer science and creative media, yes, they are separate disciplines. However, might that pupil be better off selecting another subject to ensure there's a bit more breadth to their offer? But that is probably a conversation, a consideration for that individual, and that's where we come in when we review all of the subjects. History, geography, English literature, lots of essay-based subjects, or lots of subjects with lots of written answers. If a pupil struggles with literacy, that combination might not be the best chance, offer them the best chance of success. So we're very sort of open to combinations of subjects, but we will review those as part of our review process. Thank you for the question. So Mr. Carey, thank you. Religious Studies GCSE in the brochure is actually now Theology and Philosophy. Is that correct? So we call our department Theology and Philosophy, but the pupils will still study Religious Studies, GCSE Religious Studies. It's just one of those quirks of schools like ours, I think. It's always been called Theology and Philosophy because that's what my colleagues and the teachers they cover, but pupils will be entered for GCSE RS and A-level RS, of course. Thank you for the question. And thank you, Mr. Curry, again. Your main advice on the subjects people enjoy. So I'm just reading this and summarizing it. Okay, so yes, I think my main advice, or our main advice, is for pupils to study the subjects that they enjoy and are therefore likely to work hard and succeed at. And then languages, that's another one. Of course, we promote the study of languages. We don't make study of languages compulsory. How important is language GCSE for university entry? So we've done some looking into this, and there's no evidence that universities will consider a GCSE, or whether they will look for GCSE languages, not unless it's directly related to the particular course, of course. But in terms of a general GCSE profile, we can't find any evidence that universities will look for a language at GCSE. But of course, we would absolutely promote GCSE Spanish and GCSE French, as we do with all of the GCSE option subjects, and we've got a very, very strong languages department. But I do hope that helps to answer your question. I hope I've summarized it. Thank you. Right, and also the parents' conference. Yes, I'm afraid I'm not quite sure where the crossed wires there, but the parents' conference is online. I'm afraid this one falls right bang in the middle of our mock period. So I'm afraid that there are exams all afternoon on that Friday, and the hall will be set up. So I'm afraid it simply isn't possible to offer the in-person experience that we want to offer on this occasion. So it is actually online. We will make the appointment slightly longer, and what we'll ask parents to do is to select the teachers, possibly to make the most of the evening and your time, to select the teachers of the subjects your son is considering studying. So we hope that will be a good compromise, and we'll make the appointment slightly longer for that. But I can confirm it is online. Thanks for the question. So I'm rattling through. I hope I'm like a newscaster, keeping track of the headlines as they come in. So again, another one about combined science. Do you choose which two subjects for the two GCSEs? I hope I'm not repeating myself, but you study the three subjects. You'll take exams in the three subjects, but there'll be an average grade 2 GCSEs: 9.9, 9.8, 8.8. I hope that answers that one. Mrs. Weeks as well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to repeat my answers, but in case you missed it, combined science does not restrict the ability to do science at A level. We've had pupils, I remember a pupil who got 9.8 and went on to take two sciences at A level to great success. So it doesn't limit your ability to do that. We don't offer GCSE economics. There's no economics option. Obviously, there's a natural crossover there with the business studies GCSE, but of course we do offer economics in the sixth form, and we've had no issues with there being a transition from the business studies to the A-level economics. We offer business studies A-level, of course, as well, but no discrete GCSE economics. Business studies. It's a new subject. I hope I've covered how the pupils will find out about that. Mrs. Hill will speak to the pupils, and there's lots of good detail in the options guide for you. Thank you. I feel like I've talked at you there for the last bit. I do hope, thank you for all the questions. If there are any others, please feel free to send them in. If there are any that you hadn't thought about until after this event, or in light of you reading the options guide, please do send them in. Could I please ask that you contact your son's tutor in the first instance? They will be the first port of call throughout this process. And if they can't answer it, they'll send it to the relevant head of department or to Mr. Shaw as a next step. But please do send them in. We want to help the boys get this right. So we welcome any questions. In the absence of any more, I think I'd like to round up, if that's okay. I'm conscious of your time. I do hope it's been useful. We've covered many of the questions that you will have had in advance of this evening. I'd like to just finish by saying at Shiplake, we do have a strong record of making sure that pupils start on the correct subject choices, not only at GCSE, but also in the sixth form. There's lots of care and attention for the individual, of course, and that's one of our or key offers here at Shiplake, and there's no better example than this than the subject choice process. We want to ensure that pupils are on the subjects they enjoy, the subjects they'll work hard in, and most importantly, the subjects that will give them the greatest chance of GCSE success. So as I say, this is the start of the process, but we look forward to being in touch with you throughout this month. And my thanks to Mrs. Coulihan for joining us this evening. And I'll give you a plug for your talk, Mrs. Coulihan. It's on Saturday morning. Is it the 3rd of February?
It is Saturday, the 3rd of February.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I know that you would
19:30 in the lecture theatre.
Perfect. I know you'd welcome any questions at that event as well.
Yes, of course. And it's going to be a much longer, more detailed talk than this, because actually access arrangements is it's very complicated, and there are lots of intricacies with regards to individual arrangements. So I've only just given you an overview tonight.
That's clear. Thank you very much. Clear is complicated. Thank you very much indeed. But thank you for joining us this evening. I hope those of you who supported the football earlier have thawed out, and a link to this talk will be shared along with the slides. But I hope it's been very useful, and thank you very much.